Alright guys, so a couple days ago I came across this CNN investigation into what I can really only describe as concentration camps inside of Israel, where I've shown you guys videos and images of Palestinians who have been rounded up in Gaza, stripped down, tossed into the back of large trucks, and then shipped off to God knows where, and it turns out that these are the kinds of places that they are being taken to. So here from CNN, the title is Strapped Down, Blindfolded, Held in Diapers. Israeli whistleblowers detail abuse of Palestinians in shadowy detention center. So some of the details here, they say, at a military base that now doubles as a detention center in Israel's Negev desert, an Israeli working at the facility snapped two photographs of a scene that he says continue to haunt him. Rows of men in gray tracksuits are seen sitting on paper-thin mattresses, ring-fenced by barbed wire. All appear blindfolded, and their heads hang heavy under the glare of floodlights. And this is one of the images that was taken by one of these Israeli whistleblowers here, where you can see the men with the blindfolds on, sitting on these tiny mattresses, clearly in distressed positions. But they continue saying that CNN spoke to three Israeli whistleblowers who worked at the Sde Timan desert camp, which holds Palestinians detained during Israel's invasion of Gaza. All spoke out at the risk of legal repercussions and reprisals from groups supportive of Israel's hardline policies in Gaza. They paint a picture of a facility where doctors sometimes amputated prisoners' limbs due to injuries sustained from constant handcuffing. Amputations being done because they have subjected these prisoners to handcuffs and certain kinds of positions that apply so much stress on their wrists that they have to then amputate the limbs. That's the kind of shit we're talking about. They say it also details how there are medical procedures that are sometimes performed by underqualified medics, earning it a reputation for being, quote, a paradise for interns, and where the air is filled with the smell of neglected wounds left to rot. According to these accounts, the facility, some 18 miles from the Gaza frontier, is split into two parts: enclosures, where around 70 Palestinian detainees from Gaza are placed under extreme physical restraint, and also a field hospital, where wounded detainees are strapped to their beds, wearing diapers, and fed through straws. Now, later on in this piece, they give us a recreation, an image of what this scene potentially looks like, and it is just as dystopian, just as hellish, just as nightmarish as you could imagine. They say, quote, they stripped them down of anything that resembles human beings, said one of the whistleblowers who worked as a medic at the facility's field hospital. The beatings were not done to gather intelligence, they were done out of revenge, said another whistleblower. Quote, it was punishment for what they, the Palestinians, so collective punishment there, did on October 7th, and punishment for behavior in the camp. And so this is the location here in the Negev desert where this camp is supposedly located. They say the IDF did not directly deny accounts of people being stripped of their clothing or held in diapers. Instead, the Israeli military said that the detainees are given back their clothing once the IDF has determined that they pose no security risk. So what exactly is the implication there? I'm supposed to believe that having clothing is a security risk? You had to strip them down, you had to subject them to humiliating conditions, you had to strap them to beds and put them in diapers and feed them through straws because of security reasons? That's the explanation that we're getting here from the IDF? They say the camps are part of the infrastructure of Israel's unlawful combatants law, an amended legislation that passed by the Knesset last December that expanded the military's authority to detain suspected militants. The law permits the military to detain people for 45 days without an arrest warrant, after which they must be transferred to Israel's formal prison system, or the IPS, where over 9,000 Palestinians are being held in conditions that rights groups say have drastically deteriorated since October 7th. And this is not the only reporting that I've covered on this channel similar to this. I've seen other further reporting well before this recent investigation came out, detailing how many of these Palestinians, and keep in mind, many of them are held in administrative detention. They are subjected to military courts. They are never given anything remotely resembling due due process or anything like that. And the conditions within these detention camps, or whatever you want to call them, have gotten significantly more violent since October 7th, whereas this one whistleblower was detailing above, you basically have a bunch of IDF guys or a bunch of security forces who are just taking out their personal anger against random Palestinians that they have in their custody and subjecting them to the most gruesome forms of torture that I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, this is really only comparable to things like, Abu Ghraib, for example, where the US was also torturing people. They say two Palestinian prisoner associations said last week that 18 Palestinians, including leading Gaza surgeon Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, had died in Israeli custody over the course of the war. And here we get a picture of some of these Palestinians who have actually made it back to Gaza after being subjected to some of these conditions. So here we get some more information in terms of a personal perspective. This is Dr. Al-Ran, okay, a Palestinian who holds Bosnian citizenship. He headed the surgical unit at northern Gaza's Indonesian hospital, one of the first to be shut down and raided as Israel carried out its aerial, ground, and naval offensive. He was arrested on December 18th, he said, outside of Gaza City's Al-Ali Baptist Hospital, where he had been working for 3 days after fleeing his own hospital, the Indonesian one, in the heavily bombarded north. He was stripped down to his underwear, blindfolded, and his wrists tied, then dumped into the back of a truck where, he said, the near-naked detainees were piled on top of one another as they were shuttled to a detention camp in the middle of the desert. If this isn't setting off alarm bells for people, if this is not, hearkening back to other genocides that we have seen throughout the last 100 years or so, then I don't know what will. You're talking about arresting a doctor, okay? A fucking doctor, stripping him down, tossing him into the back of a truck, shipping him off to the middle of a desert into a concentration camp where you are then subjecting him to massively, inhumane conditions. This is where we're at right now. They say Al-Ran was held in a military detention center for 44 days. This is a doctor. 44 days in this detention center. He said, our days were filled with prayer, tears, and supplication. This eased our agony. We cried and cried. We cried for ourselves, for our nation, for our community, for our loved ones. We cried about everything that crossed our minds. And you can see a picture here of the before and after of this doctor. I mean, clearly looks like he's been through some of the most intense trauma you could possibly imagine. They say a week into his imprisonment, the detention camp's authorities ordered him to act as an intermediary between the guards and the prisoners, a role that is known as shawish, or supervisor in Arabic. According to the Israeli whistleblowers, a shawish, or a supervisor, is normally a prisoner who has been cleared of suspected links to Hamas after interrogation. So you see what they're doing here? Even some people who they had cleared of any supposed links to Hamas, they are keeping them there to act effectively as like translators in their concentration camp. And they detail that more here. They say Al-Ran says that he served as a shawish for several weeks after he was cleared of Hamas links. Whistleblowers also said that the absolved shawish served as intermediaries for some time. For acting as this intermediary, Al-Ran said that he was given a special privilege. His blindfold was removed. He said that this was another kind of hell, saying, quote, part of my torture was being able to see how many people were being tortured, he said. At first you couldn't see, because they were blindfolded, you couldn't see the torture, the vengeance, the oppression. When they removed my blindfold, I could see the extent of the humiliation and abasement. I could see the extent to which they saw us, not as human beings, but as animals. They go on. They say Al-Ran's account of the forms of punishment he saw were corroborated by the Israeli whistleblowers who spoke with CNN, and a prisoner who committed an offense such as speaking to another prisoner would be ordered to raise his arms above his head for up to an hour. The prisoner's hands would sometimes be zip-tied to a fence to ensure that he did not come out of the stress position. For those who repeatedly breached the prohibition on speaking and moving, things that human beings like to do sometimes, right? The punishment became more severe. Israeli guards would sometimes take a prisoner to an area outside the enclosure and beat him aggressively, according to two whistleblowers and Al-Ran. A whistleblower who worked as a guard said that he saw a man emerge from the beating with his teeth and some bones apparently broken. That whistleblower and Alron also described a routine search when the guards would unleash large dogs on sleeping detainees, lobbing a sound grenade at the enclosure as troops barged in. Alron called this the nightly torture. So, this is the kind of shit that we are supporting. This is the country that we are sending billions and billions of your dollars, American taxpayer dollars, to support. A country that is mass arresting, vastly disproportionately, Palestinian civilians and subjecting them to torture to the point where some of them are having amputations because of the conditions that they are being subjected to. I mean, this, credit to CNN for coming out with this report. And I do want to make a clear distinction here, because there are some investigative journalists, there are some international correspondents who do great work at some of these, mainstream media organizations. It's mostly the domestic pundits that I have a major issue with, right? And their commentary, their coverage is absolutely horrendous. But it just amazes me that CNN can come out with an investigation like this, and you still have CNN anchors every single day who are talking about this as if, well, this is just about a targeted operation against Hamas, right? This is about freeing the hostages or whatever else, right? Of course, Israel would never intentionally harm any civilians. And at the same time, their own network is coming out with investigative reports about Israel arresting fucking doctors and then torturing them. And this is something we're supposed to accept as normal? We're supposed to accept the State Department report that came out a couple of days ago saying that there's no conclusive evidence that Israel has ever violated international law, so therefore the weapons we're sending them are totally legal and fine? This is what we're supposed to believe? Now, in the meantime, as this is happening, right, we also have reports like this. I covered this yesterday coming out of Reuters. Gaza aid operations could grind to a halt within days. And the reason for this is because Israel recently obviously captured the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, and that has effectively, at least as of right now when I'm recording this video, been mostly shut down. They've also largely shut down the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza, and now we're at a point where even after we have the World Food Program declaring that there is a full-blown famine in the north of Gaza that is rapidly spreading south, there is now even less aid that is getting in to this population. Now, we also have, at the same time, some rabid far-right Israelis who decided to go to the UNRWA headquarters, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem, and basically tried to set the entire thing on fire. Okay? I mean, here from Kenneth Roth, he says, I can't imagine that Israeli security officials are not closely monitoring UNRWA headquarters in Jerusalem. They couldn't have been ignorant of this arson as it was being committed. And so the effect of this is that UNRWA essentially in East Jerusalem had to shut down this headquarters location because some Israelis decided to go and to try to torch the place, right? And again, as Kenneth Roth was just pointing out there, this is the former director of Human Rights Watch, by the way, as he was just pointing out there, there's no chance that the Israeli security forces are not closely monitoring this UNRWA location. I mean, this is the same organization that the government, the state of Israel, has been trying to delegitimize, has been trying to erase from existence for months and months and months at this point. Not only because UNRWA is one of the main organizations in terms of facilitating aid to the population of Gaza, but more importantly, because UNRWA represents the existence of Palestinian refugees from the Nakba, for example, and Israel does not want to accept the existence of Palestinian refugees, Palestinians who have been forced from their land at the outset of the establishment of the State of Israel and then on. And so they've been going with this full frontal attack against UNRWA as an organization, comparing them to Hamas, saying that they are fully complicit in everything. We had that allegation that came out from the government of Israel saying that 12 out of 13,000 UNRWA employees in some way participated in October 7th. They never provided any evidence to back up that claim, but even though they never provided evidence, the United States government went fully along with them and enshrined in legislation through Congress that we are effectively banned from continuing to fund UNRWA. So, I mean, the U.S. has been fully complicit in the attacks on UNRWA, as well as obviously the Israeli government, but this is just the latest. And we have this other update, too, that came out where apparently the Israeli government is saying, even though there was an arson attack on the United Nations Relief and Works Agency headquarters in Jerusalem, we can't really do anything about it because apparently this was involving some minors, and so there's no subjection to, criminal prosecution. I guess they're just going to do an investigation and then, give them detention or something like that for these kinds of actions. But in the meantime, we also have, declarations continuing with the same theme that I've been talking about for a long time on this channel. Here we have Yoav Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, saying, quote, "There needs to be a large and significant city developed there," he's talking about the West Bank, "that allows us to shift Israel's population eastward." So I've covered statements like this from guys like Bezalel Smotrich and guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir, the finance minister, and then the minister of national security, respectively. I've covered similar statements from them before, where they openly praise and talk about the expansion of the totally illegal settlements into Palestinian territory in the West Bank. But here we have a further statement from the defense minister. I mean, this is a top member of Benjamin Netanyahu's government here. This is Yoav Gallant that we're talking about, just openly discussing, yeah, we need to continue these illegal expansions of settlements, right? We need to shift Israel's population eastward. What is east of Israel? It is the West Bank that is in that location. So to have these kinds of open statements, to me, the reason that I bring this up, the reason that I think this is important, is because this is very clearly not about Hamas. This is not about fighting terrorism. This is not about anything other than continuing with the expansion of a settler colonial project. That's what this is. This is an open admission of the ethnic cleansing intentions of the government of Israel. That's exactly what this statement is. Now, at the same time, as we have reports like aid operations grinding to a halt into Gaza, we have, once again, Israeli citizens, who are taking matters into their own hands and going out and trying to directly sabotage the limited aid that is supposed to be getting into Gaza. So here from Barak Ravid, we have Israeli right-wing activists blocking aid trucks which were on their way to Gaza. And this is at the Tarkumia crossing in the West Bank. And you can see them here literally just destroying trucks full of aid. I mean, what does this say about Israeli society? I mean, I've shown you guys the previous videos of Israeli civilians going to the border of Gaza and basically setting up bouncy castles and having raves and handing out popcorn and candy to people as they're blocking the aid trucks from getting in. This is taking it up to an even, more drastic level where they're just straight up destroying the aid itself. And I mean, this is all done with the IDF, with the Israeli government looking on. This is not able to happen without, implicit approval from the Israeli security forces. And so this is what they're doing at the same time that the population of Gaza is starving. But again, what does this say about Israeli society, right? Has there ever been a circumstance like this? I've never seen anything like this in my entire life, where civilians are going to sabotage aid that is intended for a starving civilian population. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I mean, just they are fully captured by this mass pro-genocide hysteria inside of Israel right now. And that's backed up by the polling data, right? I've shown you guys the polling showing that an overwhelming majority of Israeli society believes that the IDF is either engaging in the right amount of force or not enough force inside of Gaza. So, I mean, we've seen the polling data, we've seen videos like this. I think it's pretty clear exactly, where Israeli society is right now, unfortunately. Now, at the same time, we also have this update here with another resignation from the USG. This time it was at the Department of Defense Intelligence Agency. Here we got Captain Harrison Mann. His resignation letter cites, quote, "the nearly unqualified support for the government of Israel, which has enabled and empowered killing and starvation of tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians and encourages reckless escalation that risks a wider war." And listen, I mean, this is not the first resignation that we've seen. I've covered other previous ones from the State Department especially, but, this is something that the Biden administration has gotten used to at this point, right? It's very clear that his policy towards Israel is totally irrational, even just from a, America first so-called perspective, right? What is actually in the best interests of the United States government? This doesn't even track with that kind of an analysis. His approach to Israel to give them carte blanche authority to do whatever they want with no real enforceable red lines whatsoever, is an obvious failure. It's a moral failure, it's a political failure, it's a military failure, it's a geopolitical failure, top to bottom. And it seems like there are a lot more people within the Department of Defense as well as the State Department who are coming to realize this and resigning their positions. So credit to this guy, I guess. It's a long time into this, but I guess that's what it takes. So I'll leave you guys off with that. Horrifying reports continue to come out every single day. I mean, half the stuff that I see coming across my news intake is stuff that I can't even really show you guys because it would get censored on YouTube. I mean, the amount of videos of, blown up children and families and apartment buildings and, refugee camps, etc. It's horrifying. It is genuinely horrifying. And it looks like the offensive inside of Rafah is significantly escalating at this point. It's getting more intense, not only in Rafah, but also in other parts of Gaza, especially in the Jabalia refugee camp, for example. And it's just a nightmare that continues to unfold every single day. And we have a political leadership class, we have a media class in this country that overwhelmingly wants to normalize this. It cannot be normalized, okay? We are witnessing an unfolding genocide. We are witnessing the mass rounding up of a vast amount of civilians inside of Gaza who are then shipped off to concentration camps to be subjected to torture. This cannot be allowed to be normal.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying